Hello, my name is Keeley and welcome to my new reading nook. In case you can't tell, I moved in the last couple weeks. The past couple videos have been pre-filmed from when I was in my old apartment. So I've been here for a little bit over 3 weeks now and we're settling in. Things are feeling like home. But yeah, I figured I'd show off the new place, film a video, and what I wanted to do today was show you my book setup in the new apartment. So it's going to be kind of a bookshelf tour, kind of explain how I organize my books and my system, so to speak. So yeah, I'm really excited. I'm going to show you guys all the stuff that I have, and just to note, most of the books on my shelf right now I have not read, and that's because one, I have a book buying problem. That's for certain. But two, it's because a lot of the books that I have read already are at my actual house. Like, this is my college apartment, so a lot of the books that I've read in the past are there, and this bookshelf that I have in my college apartment is mostly the books that I've accumulated in the past, you know, year, 2 years, 3 years that I've been wanting to read in the future. So it is kind of like my big holistic TBR, as well as a bookshelf tour, because it's mostly books I haven't read. So yay, I'm really excited to get into it, and let me just flip the camera around and I'll show you my bookshelf. Okay, hello. Welcome to my bookshelf. It is just kind of a very cheap bookshelf from Target that I bought because it fit perfectly in this really small space. And the way that I have it set up is that I'm using the four of the 5 shelves that it has. Yeah, and the way that it's set up, just to kind of give an overview, is just by alphabetical order, by author's last name. I don't do like specific areas for specific genres yet. One, because I don't have the space in my college apartment right now, and two, because I feel like I don't have enough books to do that yet. But hopefully when I move after college, this is my senior year, after I move, hopefully I'll be able to have like a crazy setup, but as of now, it's just this one shelf, but it does the job. So I figure what I'll do is just kind of walk through the shelves and talk a little bit about the books. So let's see, how best to do this. Okay, I'm gonna like go like that. Okay, so the first book that I have right here, I don't know, I'm not gonna pull them out because I think that that's gonna be chaotic. But the first book that I have is The House of Spirits by Isabella Allende. And this is a book that I recently picked up from the Brookline Booksmith in Boston. It's kind of like a magical realism story, and I believe that it's set in Latin America, and I could be wrong, but that's the first book. Then I have all of my Jane Austen, so I have Emma, I have Persuasion, and I have Sense and Sensibility. I had a copy of Pride and Prejudice and I can't find it anywhere, which is a little upsetting because I love Pride and Prejudice, but the way I see it, it's now an excuse to get like a really pretty copy of it because I love it so much. So that's my Austen collection. And then I have James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time, and it's really a small book. I haven't read it yet, but I picked it up, I think, a year and a half ago, and I think that it would be one that would be pretty easy for me to pick up like in an evening and just kind of finish it. I think it's only like 100 pages, maybe a little bit over that. Yeah, so I'm excited to read about that. James Baldwin was kind of like a, would you call him like a civil rights author? Well, he wrote a lot about like the Black experience in America, and so I think that that's something that as a white person is really important for me to educate myself on more, and I think that I've heard a lot of really good things about his writing, so I was really glad to pick that up. The next one is The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. This seems so good. I've heard nothing but good reviews about it. It's basically about two, I believe they're twin sisters, and they're white passing, but they're Black, or like their family is Black, and so they get separated, and one decides to live as a Black woman, and one decides to live as a white woman, and so there's really interesting conversation about like race dynamics in America, and apparently the writing is really great as well. So I'm excited to pick that one up someday. The next one is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I've heard such good things about this book, and considering my love of Pride and Prejudice, I felt like there's a good chance that I'll also be a Wuthering Heights fan, but I guess we'll find out. Then we have The Edge of the Sea by Rachel Carson, which if you've seen my past 2 TBR videos, you'll know that I've been kind of working through that over the past 2 months. I'm hoping to finish it in September, but it's kind of an ecological non-fiction book that talks a lot about like the intertidal zone, like where the sand or like where the land meets the sea, and she was a professional zoologist, and so it's super interesting like scientifically, but also her writing is super beautiful, so it kind of blends ecology with poetry in a cool way. The next book, what is this? Oh, this is my little tiny Chekhov play. I have a copy of The Cherry Orchard by Anton Chekhov because I had to read it for school. It was good, but I feel like in order to really fully understand Chekhov, I feel like I'd have to read a much longer work, but you know, we'll see. And then I have Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, which is going to be on my October TBR, and I'm really excited about that one. I'm really excited to pick up like more mystery spooky books in that month. And then I have The Last Romantics by Tara Conklin. And this is kind of like a sibling dynamic story. I picked it up after reading Celeste Ng's work. I read Little Fires Everywhere, and I was kind of really interested in like the sibling dynamics, the like inner workings of the family, and The Last Romantics seems to kind of be about that. And then I have, let's see, Changes in the Land by William Cronin. I also had to read this for school. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I study environmental policy. So Changes in the Land is kind of like a history about the way that farming practices and land management practices changed when European settlers came to the East Coast. Yeah, I found it really interesting. If that's something that any of you are interested in, I highly recommend it. And then I have, let's see, The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. This is also a new one that I picked up. And it's kind of like a thriller. This woman's husband goes missing, and he leaves like a very cryptic message for her to like take care of his daughter, her stepdaughter, and as they kind of try and uncover the secrets together, they kind of grow closer, it seems like. Apparently it's super fast paced. I think it was one of the Book of the Month picks, which is cool, so I definitely want to read this one soon. And then there's Damnation Spring by Ash Davidson. Like I said, I study environmental policy, and a lot of that has to do with environmental justice and trying to create policies that support the people among us who have been exploited. And this story is actually about something similar. It's about a logging community in California, and it talks a lot about the way that the logging manufacturing process has impacted the community around it in interesting ways. You know, the women in the area struggle with infertility, there's lots of health problems, there's also kind of financial barriers because this is sort of the only industry in the area, but it is like a fiction novel. It's just talking about one family's story growing up in this community and kind of trying to assert themselves in their lives while always having this presence of this large company that like looms over their community. It sounds amazing. This one was for sure a Book of the Month pick, and it seemed right up my alley, like I said. Okay, then I have Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Yeah, that's a big book. That's a big book, and that one scares me a little. But one day I really want to do Crime and Punishment and also War and Peace by Tolstoy. I don't have a lot of experience with Russian literature. Like I said, the only thing I really have on my shelf that I've read is The Cherry Orchard by Chekhov, but it's quite literally tiny, like to the point where you can't even write the name of the play on the spine because it's that small. Yeah, so that's Crime and Punishment. Then I have Untamed by Glennon Doyle. I have not read this one yet, but it's kind of like a memoir, like a female empowerment story. I've heard mixed reviews, so that's why I've been like not super like quick to pick it up, but I've also known some people who really, really loved it, so I think that I might enjoy it. And then we have Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Safran Foer, I think. This is really an interesting story. It's been on my TBR for like years, but it's about a little boy who loses his father in 9/11, and then he finds a key in his things, and he kind of like runs around New York City trying to find where this key leads to, so it's really interesting. And then I have Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford, which I read last month. And it's a memoir. It's a memoir about a woman growing up in Indiana while her father is in prison. The writing was really good. It was relatively short, and I would really, really recommend that one. So the next one that I have is an essay collection by Roxane Gay called Bad Feminist. I have not actually finished this one, even though it's been on my TBR for a while, but I've heard really good things, so I'd hope to get to it soon. Next up, I have my Malcolm Gladwell's. I have Talking to Strangers and The Tipping Point. Talking to Strangers I loved. I liked it better than Outliers, which was the other Gladwell that I've read. The Tipping Point I haven't read yet. And I also haven't read Blink or The Bomber Mafia, which is his new one, but he was recommending that people listen to that via audiobook, so I might try and do that. Then we have Superpower by Russell Gold. This is a book about wind energy and wind turbines and kind of the way that they've taken hold in America. And as I said, I study environmental policy, renewable energy technologies, so that book is of interest to me for career purposes and also just general curiosity. The next one was The Sea of Lost Girls. It's by Carol Goodman. I keep like jumping up and down. This one I read in July as well. It was good. It was like, it was like a beachy thriller, so it did the job. Then I have An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. I'm a big fan of John and Hank Green, and I've never read anything from Hank. He recently released, I think, the sequel to that book, so I'd hope to get to this and then also get to the next one. But it's kind of like a sci-fi book about like the age of the internet and like technology, so it's like a commentary on our reliance on it, I think, which is really interesting. Next up on my shelf I have John Green, The Anthropocene Reviewed. I've read a lot of books by John Green. I've read Looking for Alaska, The Fault in Our Stars, An Abundance of Catherines, Paper Towns, all those, and I liked them as a teenager. I liked them a lot, but this is more of his like nonfiction debut, and I really like his podcast of the same name, The Anthropocene Reviewed. And I liked it because this copy is signed, which is always fun. The next book that I have is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. Kristen Hanna is a super popular author. She wrote The Great Alone, Firefly Lane, so you might have read some of those, but this one is really interesting to me. It's kind of like a dual perspective historical fiction about World War II, and I think it deals with sibling dynamics as well, so it kind of has a lot of the components that I tend to like in books. I kind of feel like I'm bound to like it. However, it's huge. It is such a big book, so I'm kind of scared of it, but I feel like as soon as I do read it, I'm going to enjoy it. Next I have Mississippi Solo by Eddie L. Harris. This book is really interesting. It was recommended to me in my environmental justice class when we were having conversations about accessibility of the outdoors and like outdoor recreation activities to marginalized groups. So Eddie Harris is a black man who went on this expedition to, I believe he canoed down the Mississippi River alone, which is very dangerous, but it's kind of like a commentary about like his thoughts while he did that, his relationship with nature as a black man. Yeah, so I'm really excited to get to that. Then I have Walking Softly in the Wilderness by John Hart, and this I picked up at like a used bookstore. It was published by the Sierra Club, and it basically is like a backpacking guide because I want to get into backpacking soon. Yeah, so I'm excited about that. And then I have The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. Never read it actually, which I know it's been popular for many years, but I never got around to it. I think I might try to get to it in October or November, which is when I'm trying to get to a lot of thrillers, but we'll see because I am pretty behind on my September TBR. The one book that's not going to be in here is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides because I'm reading that right now. It's over there. I'm about like 180 pages in, I think. I'm really enjoying it, but my pace this month has been super slow. So all this to say, I don't know if I'm going to get to The Girl on the Train this fall season, but I'd hope to. Next I have The Old Man and the Sea by Hemingway, which I read early in September, and I enjoyed, but I'll give more thoughts in my wrap-up for September. Then we have Beach Read by Emily Henry, which is like a romance, kind of like a frenemies to lovers kind of thing. And that was really fun. I read it in the summer on the beach, so it was pretty fitting. Then I have Power by Linda Hogan. I read this for school. It's a really interesting novel kind of about like indigenous, like a girl who's from an indigenous tribe, and there's like kind of a crime that occurs in the beginning, and then the rest of it is kind of her trying to like meld her two identities as an indigenous woman, and also she has some pulls like to the outside of the tribe world. But it was super interesting and made me think a lot about just indigenous relations in America as a whole. Then I have Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. I've heard really good things on BookTube about this. It seems to kind of be like a kind of a romance, but more so like a personal development story. But I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a fun read. Then I have The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, which is definitely on my October TBR. I really want to read this one. And I love Shirley Jackson. The next book I have is We Have Always Lived in the Castle by her, and that's one of my favorite like spooky novels. So big fan of that if you've never read it. Then I have The Jane Austen Society by Natalie Jenner. And this is more of a new release, I think, and it's kind of about people from different backgrounds who come together to try and save Jane Austen's like lands, like her grounds. Her estate is what I'm trying to say. And so I love Jane Austen, so I thought this would be a fun read to read about Jane Austen. Then I have Elton John's autobiography called Me. I really loved it because I love Elton John. I mean, was it like groundbreaking crazy? Probably not, but it was an interesting life. I mean, he's a rock star, so if you're interested in interesting memoirs, pick up that one. Then I have Stephen King, Misery. That's another one that I really want to get to in October. So I'm hopeful that that one will end up on the TBR. The Haunting of Hill House and Misery are two that I really want to have on my October TBR. But like I said, my pace has been so slow, so I'm kind of like trying to dial back like the ambitiousness of my TBR for October. So we'll have to see what actually ends up on it. Then I have The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. And this is like kind of a magical realism, like found family, like subtle fantasy story. I've heard such good things about this, and I've heard it's just totally heartwarming, and that there's LGBTQIA+ romance in it, which is so fun, especially in the fantasy genre. Like I feel like that's not a genre where I see a lot of LGBT romances a lot. I also don't read a lot of fantasy, so that's probably part of it, but I'm excited for this book. Then I have Woodswoman by Anne LaBastille, and she's kind of like, the book is billed as like the female Henry David Thoreau. Like she basically goes into the Appalachian Mountains and like lives on her own in a cabin, and it's her experience getting close to nature, all that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of excited for this one. Then I have The Kennedy Women by Lawrence Leamer. This is an interesting book because it's like a history of the Kennedy family, but focusing on the women. So like JFK and RFK's mother, like the wives, Jackie Kennedy, the sisters, Ethel Kennedy, RFK's wife. So all of those people that were, you know, so relevant during like really important historical events. But it's a focus on them instead of the men in their lives. So I thought that would be super interesting. It is huge though. It's like really thick. Yeah. Then I have If Then by Jill Lepore, which I loved. That one was so good. It's kind of a history of like the way that we do social science. And I'll kind of leave it at that. It's the history of the way that we do social science, the way that we use data on human behavior to make decisions, and specifically to influence politics. So if that's something that you're interested in, she's a historian, so it's a historical perspective. But yeah, big fan of that one. Then I have This America by Jill Lepore, which is supposed to be read in conjunction with These Truths, which is her huge book that's like an entire history of like the United States from the beginning. And I haven't read these truths yet, so I'm kind of putting that on the shelf until I do. Then I have David Leviathan's Every Day, which I randomly picked up in a free book box in my neighborhood the other week. This is basically about a character who's like unnamed almost. I think he's just called A, and he wakes up in somebody else's body every day, which is kind of fascinating, and I'm intrigued by the concept. Then I have Waters Under the Earth by Carolyn Wilson Link, and it's just basically a book of poetry. I picked up the book in a vintage store, so like an antique store, but it just seemed like a very cute like book of poetry that's about the earth and like nature and humans' relationship with nature. Then I have Two Kisses for Maddie by Matt Logelin, or Logelin, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. This is a memoir about a man who loses his wife shortly after she gives birth to their daughter, Maddie, and it's kind of about his way of him like navigating life after loss. So it's a lot about grief, single parenthood. It was really beautiful, but very sad. Then I have The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas, which was the prequel to the Throne of Glass series, and I read that in either July or August. Now I have the first book in the Throne of Glass series on my shelf by Sarah J. Maas, Throne of Glass, and that is one that I need to get to at some point soon. I've mentioned before, but my friend Abby was trying to help me out of a reading slump, and so she suggested that I read these books. They're like fast-paced YA fantasy. Then I have A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tahira Mafi, and I think this is like a coming-of-age story. I've had it on my shelves for a while, but I haven't picked it up yet. Yeah, so it's basically a Muslim girl going to school a year after 9/11 and kind of navigating in America as well, and kind of navigating the prejudices that are kind of levied against her when she obviously had nothing to do with it, but people are using her as someone to blame. Yeah, so it's like a fiction coming of age. Then I have 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This one's been very hyped up recently, but I think he won the Nobel Prize in Literature for it, so I think deservedly so. Yeah, I haven't gotten to it yet, but I'm really excited to. It's basically it's a magical realism that follows one family through different generations, and you kind of see what happens to the town that they live in as that happens. Then I have a picture book called Raven. I also had to read this for a class, and it's basically like an indigenous folk tale about how we got the sun. It was really cute, and the illustrations were really cool. Then I have Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which is like a folk, what would you even call that? It's kind of like in the Beowulf genre where it's like super old and we've preserved it for a very long time. I actually thought the story was super fun. I had to read it for school, but I'd recommend if you're interested in something kind of fun, old and tiny. Then I have The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This is where the maidens would go. The Silent Patient is kind of like a thriller about a woman who kills her husband and like doesn't reveal why. And then after this would be The Maidens, which is kind of like a dark academia murder mystery. Then I have The Radium Girls by Kate Moore, which is about the women who basically were given like mouth cancer because of their factory jobs that worked with radium. It's a big book as well, but I think it's really interesting, and I've had it recommended to me multiple times like by professors because it relates to kind of like environmental harm and like poisoning, chemicals, stuff like that. Then I have Celeste Ng's Everything I Never Told You. I've heard wonderful things about this, and I really enjoyed Little Fires Everywhere, which was her other book. And my mom actually has that copy, so that would be on here, but it's in Michigan with my mom. But yeah, it talks about sibling dynamics after the loss of one of the siblings. Then I have The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, which is basically like an on-the-ground war novel about the Vietnam War, talking about the Vietnamese people and like the impact that the war had on them. So it'll obviously be very sad. I've heard it's devastating and a little bit graphic, but I think it'll be kind of beautiful to read at some point. I think it's an important book. Then I have Last Call by Daniel Okrent. And this is kind of like a history of, why can't I think of the word? Prohibition. It's the history of the Prohibition era and kind of like how people like found loopholes to Prohibition and things like that in America. Then I have The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. This one is super popular. I've seen a lot of people talk about it. And I think it's about sibling dynamics and about kind of being like ostracized from the family and trying to come back in like the way that art connects the family together, which sounds really interesting. Then I have The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by, what's her first name? By Disha Filia. It's a short story collection about Black women and kind of like Black women when they're not being forced by society to adhere to certain roles and conditions. So I'm really excited to read this. I've heard awesome things about it. Then I have The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, which I've never read, but I found a really good used copy of the 50th anniversary edition, so I'm excited to pick it up at some point. I've read Sylvia Plath's poetry, but I've never read her novel, and I'm really excited about it. Then I have The Overstory by Richard Powers, and this is a novel, but it's also kind of like, I guess, about trees. I know that's like a terrible description, but I like started reading it thinking it was something else, and then kind of found out that it was more of a novel, and I haven't like gotten back into it, but I've heard really good things about it. Let's see what's next. Then I have The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read this in August, I think, and I really enjoyed it. It was it kind of started a conversation on my channel about hyped up books and how that can impact the reading experience when you're going into something knowing that so many people love it. Then I have The Fragile Earth, this big yellow book here, and it's basically like writings over time from the New Yorker, the magazine, about climate change. And I think it was put together, I'm like, since it has different authors, I'm unsure like who to credit as the author, but it was edited by David Remnick and Henry Finder. So I'm really excited about this one. I think it's one that I'll move through like kind of slowly. Then I have Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke, the German poet from the early 1900s. I read that in August as well and really enjoyed it. Super small book, kind of like a personal philosophy kind of book. Then I have Conversations with Friends and Normal People by Sally Rooney. Conversations with Friends I have not read yet, but Normal People I read and was like meh on. I liked the writing a lot, but I just felt like there maybe should have been some content warnings for sexual violence on this book. So I enjoyed the writing, and that's why I'm like willing to give her another chance in Conversations with Friends. And she just released another book, Beautiful World, Where Are You?, that I am looking forward to reading as well. But like I said, Normal People wasn't my favorite. Then I have a book by Eleanor Roosevelt that's called It's Up to the Women. And it's kind of like her own novel, not novel, it's like a nonfiction kind of like manifesto almost about like the way that the role that women can play in history and politics and important decisions. Then I have a book that was a textbook but also can just be read, and it's called The Age of Sustainable Development by Jeffrey D. Sachs. I loved it. I read it with my sustainable development class, and I thought that it did a great job of giving like a huge overview of where we are now, like metrics of like well-being, and then where we need to improve. Then I have Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. This book I think got the Man Booker Prize for fiction, and it's basically about Abraham Lincoln and his life after his child passes away. So I'm fascinated by it. I've heard wonderful things, so I'm really excited. Then I have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. And this one is like kind of, people say that it's going to become like a modern classic just because of the writing style. And it's basically about a woman who makes a deal with the devil, but the devil doesn't tell her that the deal essentially makes it so that whenever people look away from her, they forget who she is. So like if we were talking and then I went like this, I would look back and not know who you were. So that's the way that she like walks through her entire life. And it follows her from like 1700s Paris, where she originally makes the deal, all the way up until her death. And so you kind of see the author like chronicle the whole thing, which is interesting. Let's see. Okay, now I'm on to the bottom shelf, which you can't see that well, but I'll talk about them. This is where I have a lot of David Sedaris. So I have Barrel Fever, I have The Best of Me, I have Holidays on Ice, and then at home I have Me Till Pretty One Day and Calypso, but I don't have them here. I am a huge David Sedaris fan, always have been. Sorry, I'm just gonna sit on this little bench thing and talk to you like this. Yeah, so I have 3 David Sedaris books here, and I have 2 at home that I've read before. I'm a huge fan of his writing. I think it's super, like, I just think it's really funny, and I think it's really entertaining. And then I have, he kind of does, like, kind of funny memoir type short stories, or essay collections, you could call them. Then I have A Midsummer Night's Dream by Shakespeare. I had to read this for a class again, but I did enjoy it, like, enough to want to keep it. Then I have kind of like a nature-y photo book. It's called America's National Parks, and it's pictures taken by Ian Sheave, and they're really, really beautiful. It was a gift, like kind of a housewarming gift, and I love hiking and I love the national parks, so that's been something that's fun for me to leaf through when I'm feeling it. Then I have The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. And this one came out years and years ago, and it was kind of a big hit. It's about the origin of HeLa cells in medicine and how they were actually kind of stolen. Well, not kind of stolen, they were stolen from a tumor that belonged to a Black woman. And it chronicles like her life, her cancer, the way that the cell has been used now, and the way that that's impacted her family, her descendants. Then we have Mr. Penninbraw's 24-Hour Bookstore by Robin Sloan. This one's super fun. I got like about halfway through like many years ago and never finished it, and so it's definitely on my like, it's more up there on my TBR from this shelf because I know that I already was enjoying it. And it's basically about like, I think it's got a little bit of magical realism. It's about a guy who starts working in a used bookstore and like kind of some weird happenings start to go on. This is for sure a textbook, the ultimate French review and practice. Then I have another textbook, which is Introduction to Time Series Econometrics, if you're interested in that. It's by Stock and Watson. It's, you know, it's a textbook. Then I have Donna Tartt's The Goldfinch, which I actually DNF'd. It just wasn't for me. I don't know, something about it. It was drawing out too long. I didn't really like it. I felt like maybe the writing was a little bit too complicated, like, to be useful. But that was just my opinion. I know so many people whose this is their favorite book. I also have another Donna Tartt that's on my September TBR, which is The Secret History, and this is more of like a dark academia kind of mystery book. And I'm excited to get to that one after The Maidens and kind of put them head to head. Then I have a really cute little copy of Walden by Henry David Thoreau. I don't know if you can see, but it's got like the gold on the side. It's really pretty. And obviously that is just like his, you know, writings about nature and stuff. Then I have The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. I've heard a lot of good things about that book. It's kind of like a mystery, murder mystery, a little bit of like fantasy because there's like some weird happenings, but I've heard good things. I also just think it's really freaking funny that there's like a formula for like fiction titles. Like we have like The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, like all of these things that are basically the same but different. And then we have The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. I found like a $3 copy and I just kind of wanted to have it on my shelf. We have A Midwife's Tale by Laurel Thatcher Ulrich, which is interesting. It's kind of this historian found like the diaries of a midwife in a New England town like in the 17 or 1800s, and her diaries kind of chronicled the way that her entire town changed throughout her life. And so it's a history book, but like it's like a character-driven history. And I'm really excited about it. I've heard really good things from my fellow, well, not my fellow, I'm not a history major, but from history majors that I know. And then I have Educated by Tara Westover, which is a classic memoir now. Everybody has loved it. I would say I really, really enjoyed it. It was super intense at points, but really powerful. Then I have Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton. I think I'm going to plan to read this in December because it has like cold weather vibes. I have The Gatekeepers by Chris Whipple, which is kind of, he walks through the chief of staff of like every president since they started having them, and the way that the chief of staff kind of impacted the presidency and like the larger world around them. And then I have a really pretty copy of The Picture of Dorian Gray. It's got like flowers on it and stuff. I think it's really beautiful and like gold on the side. The Picture of Dorian Gray is one of my favorite classics, so I really recommend that one if you're trying to get into classics. It's super accessible. Then we have Letters to a Young Scientist by Edward O. Wilson. And this is kind of like a riff on Letters to a Young Poet by Rilke, but it's geared at scientists. And because, like I said, I study like environmental policy, there's like elements to it that are more like social sciencey, more poetry, and then there's elements to it that are more hard science. So it's like together they will give me all the advice I need. Then I have The 10-Year Nap by Meg Wolitzer. And my understanding of this book is that it's a fiction about women who kind of like have all these big ambitions for their life, and then 10 years later they're kind of like, whoa, like what have I accomplished? And it's them kind of navigating feelings of unfulfillment. Then I have Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf and To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I've read Mrs. Dalloway, loved it. To the Lighthouse is on my September TBR, haven't started it yet, but I'm trying. And then I have Ocean Vuong's On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, which is basically a letter from a Vietnamese son to his mother who is illiterate and like can't read what he's saying to her, but it talks a lot about the immigrant experience and language barriers and things like that. So that's my entire bookshelf. Yay! Yeah, that's the whole thing. As you can see, I have a lot of books. I have a lot of books that I still need to get to. And I'm trying, I really am. I've been moving through them faster than I have in the past couple years. So, yeah, I'm really, really excited about all the books that I have on my shelves, and I can't wait to get to them. So, thank you so much for joining me in my new reading nook, and for taking a look through my bookshelf with me. So, thanks so much. I hope you have a good day. Bye.